Well, we'll see that this basic idea that government is created by contract, human beings are born free. That not all thinkers who follow those basic things agree on every point, and perhaps the most important point of disagreement, say between Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and then reading John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, is on the idea of natural rights and how much of our freedom and rights we give up when we create government. Take a look at Hobbes' idea. He says, "They that have already instituted a commonwealth, being thereby bound by covenant to own the actions and judgments of one, cannot lawfully make a new covenant amongst themselves to be obedient to any other in anything whatsoever without his permission." As we'll see, it's very, very important, say for Locke later on, about a generation later in his Second Treatise of Government, to say that the individuals who create government reserve the right to dissolve it and create a new one. That's why Locke was pretty much adopted by the so-called founding fathers in the early American documents, we'll see. Whereas Hobbes is saying that once you commit to creating a Leviathan, that's it. You're committed forever. You don't have the power to dissolve it. And therefore, they that are subject to a monarch cannot, without his leave, cast off monarchy and return to the confusion of a disunited multitude. And you can see what his argument here is. I mean, given the build-up to this in the very, very pessimistic view of what human beings are really like and what life is like when there is no power to overawe everyone, you can see that it's just natural that Hobbes would say, well, you can't just, for any reason, go back to that state. It would just be too horrible, right? Returning to the confusion of a disunited multitude, nor transfer their person from him that beareth it to another man or other assembly of men. For they are bound, every man, to own and be reputed author of all, that he that already is their sovereign shall do, and judge fit to be done, so that any one man dissenting, all the rest should break their covenant made to that man, which is injustice. And so they have also every man given the sovereignty to him that beareth their person. And therefore, if they depose him, if they get rid of the sovereign, they take from him that which is his own. And so again, it is injustice. Besides, if he that attempteth to depose his sovereign be killed or punished by him for such attempt, he is author of his own punishment, as being by the institution author of all his sovereign shall do. And because it is injustice for a man to do anything for which he may be punished by his own authority, he is also upon that title unjust. Really saying, the easy thing to say here is that Hobbes lived through the English Civil War, which he did. Most of the time, I think he was in exile. But he lived during a time of civil war, and so I don't think that justifies his idea completely in any sense that you cannot dissolve the Leviathan. But it definitely is the background. He's seen just what kind of suffering comes from civil war, and civil war is people attempting to dissolve an existing state authority, and he's very much against it. And he continues, he ends here, he says, "And whereas some men have pretended for their disobedience to their sovereign a new covenant made, not with men, but with God, this also is unjust. For there is no covenant with God, but by mediation of somebody that representeth God's person, which none doth but God's lieutenant, who hath the sovereignty under God," I guess. But this pretense of covenant with God is so evident a lie, even in the pretender's own consciences, that it is not only an act of unjust, but also of a vile and unmanly disposition. So, pretty amazing section where he basically gives you an account of the origin of government, and then gives you a description of what the powers of that government are, and then gives you the idea that once that government's established, in his view at least, it cannot be disestablished. It cannot be dissolved.